The largest crypto bull run in history. We have heard this get thrown around quite a bit already this cycle, and a lot of people just do not believe that it's going to happen. I do not know why. Maybe it's because they think that it's taking longer than it typically has, but that's actually incorrect. We are on time for the crypto bull run. We're on time for the alt season to really hit this market in a big way. A lot of people thought that it was going to be accelerated. A lot of people thought that, with the overall environment changing around crypto, that everything was different this cycle. We have witnessed that mistake happen many times over in previous cycles as well. Back in 2020 and 2021, there's a big narrative that this time was different and that we are going into a super cycle and institutional FOMO is going to be hitting in a big way. And we all know what happened back in 2021. But, this time, we do have some different factors here, but they're all catalyst. And it's still the same exact crypto cycle, nothing really different at all. Overall, with regulations, they're still expected towards the end of 2025 into 2026. I actually think that regulations are going to be bearish initially before we actually see positive gains from regulations for utility-based projects. So, I don't think that, this cycle is that much different at all. But welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, hopefully by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. Let's dive on in. Let's not waste any time here. So, as we do look at the Crypto Bubbles website, we could see that there is some nice green across the board for, the hourly, the daily, the weekly, and even the yearly. And even when it comes to exchanges, they're all in green, actually plus double-digit figures, a lot of them almost at 30% for the month. And most of the entire crypto market is up. We could see it from like the top 100, over 18.5%, top 200, 16.7%, the top 300, 18.7%. And then, of course, as you guys get down the list here, like the top 400 is up over 57%, which we love to see. But there's some nice green across the board. Now, the big thing that I'm actually focused on right now is what Bitcoin is doing, because Bitcoin is up in a huge way. We are actually surging past $97,000. We're up about 2.5% on the 24-hour spend, which isn't much, but on the 7-day spend, we are up about 4%. On the last 30 days, it's been a very good month for Bitcoin. The overall market cap for crypto does reclaim $3 trillion on this initial move, which is great to see as well. In terms of most of the altcoin gains in the top 24-hour span, you might not be happy about XRP, but there is some nice gains across the board for some great projects that I have mentioned on the channel already, and we love to see that. But yeah, XRP not doing too much right now, which I'll talk about here in a second. But if we do look at the CMC 100, you can see that this is starting to break to the upside after creating some lower lows, and now we're starting to create higher highs and higher lows as well. This reminds me back to September when Bitcoin initially started to do this before that much larger expansion that happened in November into December, which, if we do have something similar to that now, then we would be looking at over $150,000 for Bitcoin, and altcoins should be doing very well during that time, because I do suspect that Bitcoin dominance is also close to topping out, which we will address here in a bit. But yeah, overall, market looks pretty good. Fear and greed back to 55, pretty neutral. Big swing to the upside off of those extreme fearful levels. In terms of the alt season index, we're still very well in a Bitcoin driven market, which I will also analyze in this video. But we can't get too far ahead of ourselves here. This is very good and very bullish price action. We did surpass $95,000, which was my original target on Bitcoin, which I did outline in videos previously. 95K on Bitcoin is the weekly close that we need to see above, which I'll talk to you guys about what the weekly chart looks like. But this is Bitcoin right now. This is very good price action. We did hit a nice little high of about 97.4K earlier today, which was like around noon. And this is what the overall candlesticks look like if you really wanted to look at the candlesticks. But it's been a very good month for Bitcoin, up over 14.5%. And for something that is at Bitcoin's level in terms of market cap and price, a 15% move in the last 30 days is actually pretty good to see. And of course, on the yearly, yeah, we're still up on the yearly. But you could also see here, when we look at the overall chart here, why 95K was a very big level, like 95, 96K, anywhere around that level was huge, and it was mainly flipping support, right? Like flipping the support levels around 95K, turning them into support again would be a huge move, but we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. Now, why is Bitcoin doing such a great move so far? Like, why did all of this happen in such a short amount of time? I remember telling you guys on like the 17th that the market is coiling up. We're waiting for a much larger move here. Reason why I was anticipating that is because of gold, right? So gold is starting to sell off, and a lot of people, including myself, believe that this is initially topped here. I think that from here we kind of chop until we get back above these levels, and that could take quite a bit of time. I actually think that we are right in line with like 2020 time period on gold. And what I mean by that is if we go all the way back, to 2020, here you have that big breakout into August of 2020 before we start to just chop sideways. And that's exactly why I pulled this bars graph from August, because I do think that this is exactly how we will most likely trade gold going forward, where we have, a nice, just chop to the downside. And this is just like a long-term chop consolidation, essentially, if you want to call it that, until we actually start to break back out and retest those highs that we just hit. And, just kind of have gold cool off a little bit while everyone is flipping from gold into Bitcoin. And I think that's exactly what's happening now, because, if you actually look at this, the 21st is when we initially start to top out on gold. Bitcoin initially started to jump on the 20th, and then by the 21st, it was, surging. This is showing us that there was a rotation from gold into Bitcoin. Bitcoin was still on the show, and we start to, stop hearing about gold. The reason why gold was surging is because it was everywhere. Everyone was talking about how good gold was performing, and the spotlight was on gold. And now the spotlight is back on Bitcoin. And this is good, especially if you do hold XRP and altcoins, because what's good for Bitcoin is good for altcoins. Now you might say, well, then why isn't XRP, pumping today? Why is, XRP only up about 0.91% on the daily, and on the 7-day, it's only up about 2.37%? Well, good question. The answer is Bitcoin dominance. While this thing is just surging to the upside, we're not going to see the biggest moves on altcoins just yet. I actually said this in the Discord as well. Like, a lot of people were asking me, like, Nick, when do you think that altcoins are going to start to take off? A lot of altcoins are still up like over 100+%. XRP did a very good run up already this year. It's showing us 336%, 337%, but it's actually a much larger push. XRP is actually up well over like 700%, almost 800% on the 1 year. And you might think like, oh, well, that means XRP's done. It's topped out. It's, finished. No. The largest moves of the cycle for altcoins don't actually happen until this chart is selling off. And this didn't, when we think about how long it really takes for altcoins to take off, this happens in like 147 days. XRP back in 2021, okay, and I can show you guys this on the candlestick bodies as well. It topped towards the end of March. By April, XRP was already topped out. All right. So that initial run up, and by the way, it's not just XRP. It's also Dogecoin. Like, we can go to Doge for an example, and I could show you guys that most altcoins do top earlier rather than later. Like here we have the top in the end of April. Like around March, April was the time where a lot of altcoins actually topped out. And that's because we started to see Bitcoin, have that nice little jump up. But a lot of people actually suspect that Bitcoin dominance did top or bottom, around this time where a lot of altcoins did top, because, this is right around that same range in which, Bitcoin dominance did start to create a floor, if you will, of support. Now, it did have a nice little spike up here and there and just kind of chop a bit. But most altcoins did top around this time period. Of course, a few did run into like October and November during that time. But that's why I say, like, we don't have actually that much time until, altcoins, go crazy and top out. So if we do start to see Bitcoin dominance weaken here, we probably only have about 3 to 6 months left of the cycle to take profits, make sure that we are, scalping some trades and just harvesting our profits. So, I'm watching this closely. But when we start to see this weekend, that's when we start to see the biggest moves of the cycle for all altcoins, including, of course, XRP. And I do think that XRP performs very well this, cycle, already has, by the way. But much higher price action for XRP is brewing, in my opinion. Now, when we think about that, we have to be aware of Bitcoin dominance, because even though most of the market is in the green, most of the market is performing well, Bitcoin could still have one last sell-off here. Right now, we just repeated this pattern that we started back in April, like April 12th, all the way through like the 20th, before that big expansion to the upside. It seems as though it's starting again. And I'm watching this very closely, because if we have that repeated, push to the upside, like we did back in the 21st and on the 22nd as well, then we would be surging well over 100K plus. Now, the reason why I have this red zone up here is because this is where we see the most amount of, resistance that we need to actually get over. Initially, it was 95K. And the reason why is because we were fighting 95K on this chart. 95K was also the wick that we wicked to back in the beginning of March. And it was also a support zone that we needed to flip. Now that we have flipped it, we must close this on the weekly. We want to actually close over like 96K, 97K on the weekly, maintain these highs. But the only problem that I do see here on like the daily for a potential sell-off is how high RSI actually is. It's in over, bot territory. And this is what's kind of concerning, because, as we were starting to jump out back in December, we were hitting these levels as well. I mean, obviously, back in November, we were already in overbought territory, which means we could still, push a lot higher here. It all depends on, volume, and volume right now is starting to diminish a bit. But even if you go to like higher time frame trading, like on the weekly, the weekly doesn't look too bad here. RSI just crossed the moving average, which is exactly why we started to really break out towards like the 21st, 20th of April. And we still have a lot more room to grow here on RSI, which is why, although, yeah, it is something that we have to be concerned about. There's a nice fair value gap down there that we could potentially fill. We could avoid this, which is why I have two scenarios on the chart around that same time period of when we get closer to that, 100K level, we could quickly surge above it and just break out and go to 120, 140K initially before we have a nice little sell off, and then 150, 170K could be the next target. It doesn't really matter about lower time frame trading. Listen, if you're not sitting here actively trading every single day, you're looking at the monitor every single day, then none of this really matters. All you really need to know is that we are going higher on Bitcoin, in my opinion. And this is all because, of course, the M2 supply is starting to expand. And when it comes to XRP, yeah, we might have one more, little tap of like $2. We might wick below it, just like we did back here in the beginning of April. But ultimately, we would close well above $1.91.5 because we want to create higher lows. And I do believe that we probably close around like $2.06 or so, maybe even higher. Or again, if we avoid any lower price action on Bitcoin here and we just continue to break to the upside, well, then XRP breaks over this upper trend line. We retest the trend line, and then we continue even higher. And that will probably be the push that actually gets us back over $3.40 and us, surging to $4 plus on Bitcoin. Now, or on XRP, sorry. Now, talking about Bitcoin, I have been watching Ethereum closely, and I do think that Ethereum is bottomed out completely. On the weekly, in terms of the Ethereum Bitcoin chart, we could see RSI in one of the most oversold territories ever, macro-wise, on this chart since inception, at the same exact time that we are retesting levels that we haven't seen since going all the way back to 2020. Now, the USD chart is already starting to break to the upside. It's already starting to front run this. And RSI is now starting to break over the moving average. The last time that we broke over the moving average was back in October, before Ethereum surged back to $4,000, almost $100. Breaking over this moving average at a time where the Ethereum Bitcoin chart looks like this could be a very big signal that Ethereum is about to wake up in a huge way, break over 2K, and retarget these highs. And while that's happening, I do think that Bitcoin dominance is going to take a big hit while Bitcoin is breaking above 100K, which will lead to altcoins going absolutely parabolic. I think that this is a perfect time in this space to be locked in and focused up on what's about to happen in this market. Because I do believe that altcoins, including, of course, XRP, are about to have one of the largest bull runs in crypto history. Now, you might say, well, Nick, we've heard this many times over. Well, yeah, you heard it over time. But now, when we think about everything that's in front of us, there could not be a more perfect environment than now to be positioned in this space and locked in on altcoins, because even stocks are now starting to break up to the upside. They're starting to flip major support zones and also resistance zones. And this is also happening while the M2 supply is expanding, and we knew that this was going to happen. And now when we think about, Bitcoin, it's almost at 100K. It's following the M2 perfectly. Now it's a 12-week lead, which means that by the summertime, Bitcoin could be trading at well over 140K, which aligns with, Bitcoin dominance. And I've shared this with you guys multiple times on the 3-month. It aligns perfectly with Bitcoin dominance taking its time and topping around the end of June into July, just like the same time frame back here when it initially topped in 2020 into 2021. 1,096 days, 1,096 days. It's almost too perfect to be true. But right now, with Bitcoin breaking to the upside, with Ethereum being completely bottomed out, extremely oversold, and altcoins just waiting to expand to the upside, I just feel as if alt season is right there. We're almost at the starting point for alt season. You could almost feel it. And, even though we might have one more, push to the downside, we might have a little bit of chop, I still think that Bitcoin is about to break back over 100K plus. And this market, it's just about to erupt, in my opinion. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because I'm more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.